at the end of the day, the reason why people are actually tired of cultural appropriation is because it has a really, really deep colonial roots to it. And people are just tired of being completely erased of the picture and having the dominant culture appropriating elements of their own culture and then suddenly making it like really cool and trendy, whereas when it's not on a Western canva, it's not that at all. Hello, beautiful people. Welcome if you're new. Welcome back if you're revenant. Please consider subscribing if you like everything and anything about secondhand fashion, chaotic styling, and yapping. For today's video, I want to talk about the lack of cultural literacy, which leads to like very flimsy cultural appropriation that I have been seeing the past few weeks from some, fashion girlies who shared what was happening, the discourse that was happening on TikTok. And one of them was about the Scandinavian shawl, which, girl, please, and how it's literally just ripping off South Asian culture and Bohemian culture. And the other one is the chanclas or the Chinese slippers, which have existed for quite some time in Latino and Black communities, mainly in New York, and then suddenly the white girls are here and it's a trendy shoe. And I wanted to talk about like what kind of forms cultural appropriation to take into account what is cultural capital. Yes, I'm going to make use of my sociology degree as well. And so this is the two examples that I'm going to talk about because I feel like that it's kind of interesting to really like think about what is cultural appropriation, like understanding the context, because I feel like that so many people tend to completely erase what people might be like, maybe like annoyed about cultural appropriation, and completely like put away like to understanding the global context as to why cultural appropriation is not okay, and also the difference between cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation. And there's a really, really fine line between appreciation and appropriation. And I think, this really fine line is like really kind of easy to cross from one side to the other and vice versa. So yeah, I wanted to talk about it so we can all hopefully understand like what is cultural appropriation, what does it bothers so much, and how to kind of really avoid appropriating but also appreciating.
But it's very European, effortlessly chic, I guess I would say.
We first going to start to talk about the Scandi Shoal situation. So, if you have not heard about it, I followed the whole thing on Instagram and also a little bit on Substack. But basically, a white creator, I think she was forecasting summer trends, and she was showing a couple of Pinterest pictures. And in those Pinterest pictures, she showed pictures of white girls wearing, shawl across their shoulder, and she called it effortless and European and all that. And Desi and South Asian women called her out for that, rightfully so, because like the way the creator was kind of talking about it is as if it was like something that was kind of new, about to come, very trendy and all of that. I already have like an issue with people talking about like Europe as a monolith, because cherry tomato Europe and potato Europe is not the same. Europe is not a monolith. It's literally very diverse as well. But that's a discussion for another day. But I think she was forecasting that, talking about Euro summer and all that jazz. And so South Asian and Desi women were literally telling her, actually, it's called a dupatta in the South Asian community, a dupatta or a chuni, and it's an element that is kind of integral part of the salwa kamit. I think it's like, I'm very sorry if I butcher the butcher up, the pronunciation, but it's the salma karit. It's a whole assemble where then you have also the dupatta, and so it's like a piece of clothing that women wear in order to show modesty, and when they go to places of worship, they also wear it over their head to cover part of their hair. So it has actually kind of a important meaning and use in the South Asian culture, and rightfully so. The people part of that culture called her out to explain to her that basically it was not a candy shawl. I don't know if that white creator is the one who actually coined the candy shawl. It's actually kind of beautiful, the response that the South Asian community decided to have, and the South Asian girlies, to reappropriate the item and kind of show that it's something that is part of our culture, and we've been wearing it for years. It's not new, and it looks as good on us that it looks on white skinny blonde Westerners. And it was a very, very beautiful, kind of taking back the power onto your hands. It kind of shows the lack of cultural literacy and just knowledge in general. I feel like that if you make videos about fashion trends and all that jazz, it's important to have like some type of cultural literacy, like not necessarily being like on point on everything, but maybe knowing that wearing, a dupatta or a shawl across your shoulder is not something that is new, because modesty fashion has been present forever. And it's not the first time that we've seen that. So I feel that it's the responsibility of the creator to, kind of do a bit more research. It's the least you can do is do more research, especially when you're talking about trends forecast, in order to then give credit when credit is due, because that's actually the whole problem with the cultural appropriation, is the fact that there's a lack of good crediting. Suddenly, it's called the candy shawl when in reality it's a dupatta. you know Suddenly we actually don't really know where this comes from, and we might think that, oh, it's something that is Scandinavian, because Scandinavian girls, that's what they wear in the summer when they go to weddings or wherever. So it's, like, this kind of situation is really kind of like, that's where the problem lies, is when like the cultural aspect and meaning of an item of clothing or whatever that is being appropriated by the dominant culture is completely erased. Like, suddenly, like, South Asian culture is not there. We don't talk about it. We don't even like take any efforts to really kind of know what is the term of this type, of shawl and all that jazz. And this then led me to kind of think about the whole bohemian, you know, bohemian like style craze that has been going on for many years. And like, because I was thinking about how, like, in the 2010s, like, so many white girls were going to festivals, especially in the UK, wearing bindies, and you're just like, girl, because it was part of the bohemian, culture, and like, and I'm putting that quote on quote, because like, it's, but we're gonna learn what the bohemian culture actually is. But this kind of idea, this very western idea of what bohemian culture is, and like the the figureheads of the Bohemian style are literally two white women. I would even say three. We have Kate Moss, Sienna Miller, and Mary Kate Olsen. And those are the figureheads of the Bohemian culture, which is kind of insane when you know the origin of the boho style and boho culture in general. 200 years back, when after the French Revolution, the term bohemianism was coined, and it was coined in order to describe a group of people, majority of them being artists and writers and painters, who after the French Revolution, they lost their patronage. So because of that, they were forced into poverty, and they had to kind of make do with what they had. And so they started, wearing secondhand clothing, re-wearing clothes, and kind of being very unconventional in the way they were dressing and they were living, which then led to a whole lifestyle, which was, seen as, those people who were very free spirited, who rejected materialism and anything that was very corrupt, and they prioritized community and coming together. And it kind of led to a whole genre of what bohemianism and bohemian lifestyle was. And then like the 19th century kind of um, brought the whole romanticization of the bohemian lifestyle, where then it was seen as this very kind of cultural phenomenon, whereas before that the term Bohemian was a pejorative term to describe Romani people. So Romani people are a nomadic people, now scattered across the world, and they're quite known here in Europe. They in a lot of places in Europe, and because they're still nomadic today, you can easily see them. They in like Eastern Europe, they in Southern Europe. Some of them are also here in Western Europe, and a lot of people tend to kind of confuse them with Romanians, which is not the same thing. Like Romanians and Romani are not the same thing. And like research have found that Romani people actually, they origin and they linguistic heritage trace them back to like northwest India, and they moved away from that region of India 1500 years ago, and then they kind of moved west and they came to the west, and then they started kind of scattering around. And in the 19th century, some Romani people went over to the Americas. But so because the Romani people are a very nomadic people, and are a people that are kind of not really understood. Mind you, I'm using Romani as an umbrella term, because within the Romani people, there's different ethnic group as well. They had a very also unconventional, lifestyle and unconventional way of dressing. And at first, the term bohemian was to describe those people because they were foreign to, the European Westerners, and it was they were seen as like less than, because they were not like Westerners. And like till today, Romani people do face a lot of discrimination, but they were already facing a lot of discrimination back then. And the reason why, so Romani people were called boho back in the days in like 18th to 19th century France, is because French people believed that those people were from a region in Czech Republic called Bohemia. Turns out it's not that at all. They originate from India, and they, way of dressing and all that inspired the artists who, in the 19th century, after the French Revolution, lost their patronage, like their royal patronage, so they could not live like this very lavish lifestyle anymore. So they had to, like I said, make do with what they had, and so they started kind of dressing however they could because they had like very little means. And so this reminded like the mainstream population of the Romani. And then, because it was like those like European slash Western artists who did that, and they kind of also shared glimpses of their work, and like their work turned into plays. And there's La Boheme. I don't know if you know this. This is a play by, like, what is the name of the it's an Italian playwright. I'm gonna put it on screen, but it's an Italian playwright who like wrote La Boheme. Already, like the Bohemian aesthetic like dates back from an oppressed people, but it got completely erased. And when it got co-opted by Westerners, suddenly it became really trendy. And then, like in the 50s and 60s, so 1950s, 1960s, so like now we're 20th century, it inspired the beats movement and the flower power movement as well, who also, kind of were rejecting like mainstream norms and materialism, just like the boho of the 19th century. In the noughties, it was in the 2010s. Then we had like the indie sleaze movement, I would say trend, the whole indie sleaze trend that kind of brought up like the revival of the boho style, because like the indie sleaze, the noughties and indices were very, very much, seen for that. I feel like that when I say boho, like one brand that comes to my mind that is very, very, bohemian and clearly took inspiration in that culture is Free People. I hear that, you cannot talk about bohemian life style and bohemian style without talking about Free People, because literally Free People is the embodiment of boho lifestyle. But like you can see over here, already the whole bohemian lifestyle is already something that has been co-opted and appropriated by the Western world. And especially when that Romani people also actually descendant of, like, have like Indian South Asian descent, it then kind of is easy to make the link with the dupatta scandi shawl situation, where you see that um again, like that white girl, she was talking about like summer outfit, summer trend, like for Europe or whatever, and she called it like very European to wear your shawl like that. And I feel like that it all comes into, I feel like the South Asian element and culture is always seen as very boho for the Western eye, which is also very interesting to see, like who gets to decide what is what. And it's always like the dominant culture, because let's be real, Western culture is today the dominant culture. There's a reason why the West went to colonize almost the entire world, and impose its own rule and custom and cultures. It's because of this idea that they're superior to the rest. So because of that, it still is, remaining within our realm and society. And there's everything that we view is always viewed within a Western lens.
I'm just here to let y'all know that the Chinese slippers have been a staple in Latino homes since the 90s. All right? Y'all did not bring this trend out. We've been on it. All right? Just to let y'all know.
Now we're going to talk about the chanclas or the Chinese slippers, wherever you want to call them, because this is the item of the summer. If you a fashion girly or you hang around, the fashion sphere, you have seen those shoes somewhere. Every fashion girlies have featured those shoes in their summer trend forecast or they wish list, or it's all over on TikTok. I feel like where the fashion girlies are sharing where to get them for cheap, and it's interesting to see that it has become so big that now brands such as Freight People and Mango are selling them at extortionate prices, but when you could actually find them for like $1 at the bodega, around the corner. And it made me think about the whole cultural capital that was coined by Pierre Bourdieu. If you're into sociology or anthropology or just understanding the society we live in, you have heard about Pierre Bourdieu. He's a French sociologist who, coined a lot of theories about the like human interaction and behaviors, and he talked about the cultural capital. And the cultural capital is like the capital that you inherit from your parents, that inherited it from their parents, and and then you're going to like pass it down to your kids, and your kids going to pass it down to their kids. And the cultural capital is going to vary depending on which social class you are. And like if you from the working class, the social capital that you have is not going to be seen as something worthy of attention and important. But if you from the upper class, the social capital from that class very is seen very highly. It's very highly, it's very important, and it's kind of what defines what's good culture and what's norm. I thought about that because the fact that those chanclas were popular among working class by POC New Yorkers in like the 90s and 2000, and now that it's actually has like the attention of the dominant culture, which is white westerner the white westerner culture, suddenly it is not worthy of attention, whereas before that it was not. And all cultural appropriation is always um, needed to be seen in that lens, that the reason why cultural appropriation happens is because of cultural capital. And like there's the class cultural capital, but then there's also then the like the ethnic cultural capital. And by that I mean like Western cultural capital is seen as highly and on a pedestal to the other cultural capital of the world, because like the reason why colonialism exists is because when those colonizers went around the world, instead of trying to understand that those people who look different also have a different culture because we're in a different part of the world, they directly assume that the reason why they were like that is because their culture was like inferior to them. Instead of trying to have like some cultural literacy, they were just like, yeah, no, we're just gonna dismiss, like if they're not acting like us, it's because they're not civilized, so we need to bring them our civilization, so they can be like us and they can be like good people. And that's the problem with cultural appropriation. It's the fact that it reinforces this idea that only Westerners do things that are worthy of praise, that are, impacting the society. The whole cultural appropriation, it's not that they they're annoyed to see, people from another culture, and especially the dominant culture, which is the Western culture, wearing whatever item of clothing or whatever, because at the end of the day we cannot actually dictate what people should wear or should not wear. But it's more the fact that suddenly the item of clothing has a new name and has a new face of who invented it, and the group of people who actually were already, like, using that cultural element, or who actually birthed that cultural element, is completely erased, does not exist anymore. Everything is always very much connected, but it's important to kind of, when you do the whole deconstructing, to understand how it is connected and how it is reinforcing very colonial and racist narratives already. And that's why, like, it's important to, like, understand the difference between appropriation and appreciation. Like, appropriation is when, like, you take something that already exists, that is already part of the culture of, like, whatever group, and you decide to take it. You might tweak it a little bit, but usually it's barely seen, and then you give it a new name, and then you give it a new face. Like, someone who came up with that is that person, and that person is usually a Westerner. Appreciation would be, okay, those women are wearing this, but this is from, it's prevalent in South Asian culture. In South Asian culture, it's called a dupatta, and it's used to, like, for modesty purposes and also religious purposes if they go to places of worship. And it's different from, like, an ethnic group to another, because South Asia is a region in the world, and kind of having some cultural literacy about the whole item. When you give the, like, rightful credit and have, like, some little knowledge behind the item that you're talking about, and that's how, you appreciate the clothing. That's how thin the line is between appropriation and appreciation. For this last chapter, I want to talk about the importance of cultural slash fashion literacy. I feel like that the term literacy is being used, like, a lot lately, and for a reason, because we are lacking a lot of, like, cultural literacy, media literacy, internet literacy. Like, so many literacy is being missed. And I want to preface this chapter by saying that it's not a new phenomenon. Literacy has been lacking for a very, very long time. I gave the example of colonialism, and when those colonizers were going to the other side of the world, and instead of trying to understand and the culture that we're facing that was different from them, they decided that, they deemed that this culture was inferior. So they had to impose their own Western culture upon those people. And that is actually one of the most blatant cultural literacy that you can see, when instead of understanding, you decide to just completely ignore it and, like, move on with your business. And, like, why cultural literacy is actually so important, especially within the fashion realm, because we talk a lot about, the, like, cultural appropriation, and like, people keep saying that they're tired of hearing it. And, like, the reason why we keep talking about it is because people still don't want to really understand why we have this problem of fashion appropriation and how to avoid it. It's not complicated to avoid it. Like I said, like, give, like, proper credit when credit is due. and you can completely avoid that. Like, just say like who are really your inspiration, and that you got inspired by that, and try to get those people who are part of that culture also involved in the process. And you going to avoid completely doing some appropriation. And the reason why people also today are a bit wary when they see like some like cultural things being pushed to the mainstream, is because of, you know, the lack of proper cultural literacy and like cultural credits. You know, I said in the beginning that that white creator, if you forecasting some trends, I feel like that it's your duty to actually do some research about the fact that what those white girls that you find on Pinterest were wearing over their shoulder and chest was not like a European thing. And it's, yeah, I don't know, I feel like that, especially when you're doing this type of thing, like do your due diligence into kind of, you know, having an understanding. And we are not expecting people to know everything and to be like top notch with, you know, everything, but to have a little bit of knowledge behind it. Like, for example, you can see today what I am wearing. I am wearing this kufiya, and the kufiya is something that is actually quite prevalent, like uh, all over the Middle East, and it's usually worn as this kind of head covering by men. And in the 1930s, it was then used and viewed by the Palestinian as a like resistance symbol, because they were fighting the British mandate, like, you know, begging for independence, and also like the end of Zionist infiltration in the historic Palestine, as they were losing lands, and, you know, they were being colonized. And so like resistance fighter were first using the kafia because they wanted to hide their features so they could not be easily recognized. And then later on, like the people, like villages and people living in big towns, were also encouraged to wear the kafia, so it will be like harder to identify who is a fighter and who is not, as a symbol of resistance. And like kafias like throughout the Middle East are completely different. Here in this kafia over here, so the thick like lines that you can see is sort to represent the trails in Palestine, historical Palestine. Then, like the waves over here are supposed to be the fishnets. Like, because, you know, like you know, fishing is something that is kind of, you know, important within the Palestinian culture. And then these over here are representing the olive tree. And like olive trees are a really big element of the Palestinian culture, to the point that, you know, like the state of Israel has uprooted many olive trees to plant European pine trees or whatever that are not, you know, made for the climate. But anyways, and the ties to olive trees is very important. Like in general, like indigenous people have a really strong ties to the land they have been occupying for generations. And today, the kafia is something that you use as a like solidarity, you know, to show solidarity with the Palestinian people in the struggle to liberation. And the other thing that I am wearing is this dirdle corset, and this dirdle corset is part of an Austrian tacht that they use. Like the tacht is like a historical costume that they wear for specific, you know, events such as Oktoberfest or other events. The ones that I am wearing is an Austrian one, but like the dirndl is kind of known throughout, you know, German-speaking countries in Europe, like Germany, Austria, and Switzerland as well. And yeah, so it was something that kind of came about in the 19th century, when like upper class, like for Austria especially, upper class Austrians who would go to the countryside starting to wear those, as to kind of mimic a sort of nostalgia, and stuff. So yeah, so that's basically the history of the dildo. I bought it in a secondhand shop in Vienna, and I asked if it was actually an authentic one, and they said that that was an authentic one. And there's actually different type of dildo corset, and yeah, so you know, it just works like that. So you know, like that's the basic understanding that I have of some elements that I know are not part of my culture. But I, as someone who is actually quite interested in kind of fashion history in general, I like to know where the things are from, especially when it's a very specific things from a specific era, or like that is actually meaningful in some way. I'm not like fully, you know, in the know of everything, and you know, I try to learn a bit more, but at least I have like a like sort of understanding, like to know that, for example, today the dildo is something that is seen also as a fashion item, that you can wear, that it's still worn for, you know, big events, and is seen as a historical artifact in those German speaking countries. And yeah, so you know, like just like the kufiya, the Palestinian kufiya, as you know, a symbol of solidarity, and a symbol of resistance of colonialism. So just having those basic knowledge is important in a society that is so unfair and unjust and unbalanced, where like one culture is pushed more than the other, than the others even. um it's important to understand those nuances of why some people might be like annoyed of, you know, seeing like their culture being completely bastardized in a way, and like not even getting the credit, like you know, completely being erased and put on the side and at the back burner. And then people believing that, you know, the dupatta is actually a Scandinavian shawl, and it's from Scandinavia, when no, it's not. I don't doubt that maybe Scandinavian people might be wearing it. Colonialism is still not done. We still in neo-colonial times, and we still face a lot of discrimination when we're not from the dominant culture. So the moment people start to recognize and give credit when credit is due, and kind of, you know, acknowledging that people from the global south do contribute to the culture and to the society, to influence and all that jazz, the better it is. And you know, the actually the faster we also going to like make the whole like mentality change, and to understand that white Westerners don't have the monopoly of the world and of intelligence, of culture, of innovation, and all that jazz. That it's a collective effort, that you know, we get inspired, and it's completely normal. We share things, and we can appreciate like each other's invention and stuff like that. But we need to kind of acknowledge that you know, like Western culture is not the epitome of civilization. If anything, like Western culture is literally genocide and land theft. I don't really think it's very civilized to do so, you know. So like I feel like that, yeah, I think in one way the West needs to kind of make peace with the fact that its values and history is actually not, you know, nice and pretty, and it's quite violent, and kind of assume that and stop pretending. And in another way, accept that like Western culture have been influenced and inspired by the global south since forever, like ever since they decided to roam around the world. And it's just they just don't want to admit it. And yeah, so like, moral of the story is that you can wear whatever the heck you want to wear. Like, nobody's going to tell you what to do and what not to do. I'm nobody to tell you that. People do whatever they want to do, but I think it's important to at least have some knowledge with what you're wearing. It's so important that people get to also see clothes as, you know, a piece of art. That's what I talked about last year in my last videos, is the fact that the moment people get to see clothes as, like, you know, an art form, like craftsmanship, the better it's going to be. The better people are going to want to also learn more about, you know, the history of the clothes, and have cultural literacy behind it. And so we're going to avoid appropriating and start appreciating the culture and sharing culture. Okay, people, that is it for the video today. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up. This helps me a lot. Share it around. You know, we might have other people also questioning how to distinguish cultural appropriation to cultural appreciation. And let me know in the comments, how do you also tackle this subject? How do you deal with, you know, wanting to wear something that is not part of your culture, but still wanting to make sure that it's something that you wearing or having in a respectful way, and, you know, in a way that is showing that you appreciating the culture and not appropriating it. And in the meantime, I'll see you in my next video. Love always.